Hey guys, Murdaugh started his defense in earnest today. Before we get into it, let's go over a summary of where things stand. So right in the middle of this, I think, is the most critical aspect of this case, just my opinion, and that is Maggie and Paul's phones being last accessed, successfully at least, within seconds of each other at 8:48, basically 8:49 p.m. And then the Snapchat of them together with Alex Murdaugh at 8:46 and a half. So basically 2.5 minutes after he's heard on a Snapchat video with them, their cell phones go dormant. Now, he didn't admit to being with them. He told the police he'd seen them earlier and he took a nap. So this Snapchat video, I think, probably caught the defense by surprise when it was discovered. But it puts him there within 2.5 minutes of when they stop using their devices. And to me, that looks very terrible. Then, of course, he leaves at roughly 9:06. So let's look at some factors apart from that kind of go for him and against him. So against him, before the murders, he had heavy drug use, a lot of deception in that, boat case liability over his head, millions of dollars of stolen money he stole from clients, partners, orphans, anybody. His drug and his theft abuse were both discovered, and he lied about when he saw the victims, the nap situation. On the other side, he had a good relationship with his son and maybe with his wife as well, still, and no prior violent acts that I'm aware of. After the murders, Maggie's phone was not used again, and he had this clothing change, and he arranged the shooting of himself, right? So he staged a scene where he claimed he was shot. He lied to 911, same kind of tone of voice and franticness that he displayed when his family members were murdered, lied to the first responders, lied to the investigators, and even worked with a sketch artist for somebody who didn't exist for this situation. So he is the kind of guy who would do that. But on the other hand, this case, seemed disjointed in its presentation to be from the state, and there were some gaps in it in the investigation. There was no forensic evidence that I'm aware of really found on Murdaugh that supported him being the murderer, and no forensic evidence of any substance that I heard from the house. The weapons have never been recovered. The search seemed to be a little lackluster. It didn't really close all the ends and dead ends that maybe it should have. Then in the trial, they tried to say that he said, I did him real bad versus they did him real bad. And no. And then also the state's representative saying that, well, I can trick him on a shotgun loadout, but it turns out maybe he kind of tricked the grand jury too. That didn't look good for them. And Buster being a witness for the defense is good as well. So I think the critical issue is time frame. The victim stopped using their phones mid-text conversation within seconds of each other. That may not be a marker of the time of the attack, but it sure looks like it. Now let's look at the defense in progress. Buster took the stand. He gave, I think, measured testimony with no declarations beyond what he could know. So it's not explosive, but I think it's a boost for the defense that he would testify like this, as he is, of course, the closest person to the victims and the alleged murderer. Then an expert from Cary, North Carolina testified. There are excellent accident reconstruction engineers around here, and I expected a good presentation, and he did give one. He showed how they used fancy laser machines to make a 3D model and used state measurements to do an analysis of 2 shots, one of which impacted the quail pen, they said, and one of which impacted a doghouse. Using reasonable logic on shell casing locations and bullet trajectory, the engineer attempted to show the potential location of the shooter for these shots. And, based on the trajectory and location, the height of the firearm barrel from the ground, which was really what they were driving this toward. It started to get a little hinky to me, though, when the little gray men models were introduced, hip shooting the .300 blackout AR. The witness testified, the engineer, that these positions were just one possibility, but I think he injured his credibility later, and I'll get to that. Anyway, using the possibility he chose, the hip shooting, slightly crouched, the engineer said the shooter was something like 5'2". If you accept that, everyone can go home, because Murdaugh is a lot taller than that. I think he reports at 6'3" or something taller than I had heard, which was about 6 foot. So the 5'2" shooter was eyebrow raising, especially when there was no way to really know how the real shooter was positioned or how the real shooter was holding the firearm. But, they wanted to get that height down there, way away from what Murdaugh is. Now, the state countered on cross-examination and corralled this engineer on the limits of his expertise, and that does not include firearms or their operation beyond normal knowledge. He didn't even know the 300 blackout that they used to do the acoustics test was configured as a pistol, and if it had been a rifle, it would have been considered a Class 3 federally controlled weapon, a short barrel rifle. But anyway, I'll take his conclusion on acoustics, that one might not have heard the shots in the house, as he did go through the testing. It's contrary to my experience, but he did test the conditions. But I'm not going to take his word that the AR shooter is 5'2". I won't say it's impossible, of course, but it is not established. But yet he said it could not have been Alec Murdaugh due to his height. That's how he closed out his testimony. He didn't say probably not. He said it couldn't be him. Let's listen.
And based on the assumption that somebody would be holding a rifle either at their hip or at their shoulder in a way in which you could operate that weapon, what, if any, opinion do you have as to whether that person could be Alec Murdaugh shooting into that quail pen?
It can't be.
Thank you.
So he threw out all the possible ways a taller person might have shot from the height and all the possible variances in trajectory that could matter to declare the defendant or someone his height could not have been the shooter. Really? There's no way that could have happened just because the barrel was pretty low to the ground? Yeah, I don't buy that. I thought here he stepped past what his analysis showed, which was certainly a possibility, and he gave an opinion that contained unwarranted certainty. But I get why they need it. Remember, Alex was at the kennels just 2.5 minutes before the victims quit using their phones and only 20 minutes before he left the property. So he leaves the kennels and gets backed up to the house maybe around 8:48 at the earliest because it's some distance from the house. So far, the defense says you can't hear a gunshot from it. And then he's headed away at 9:06. So during this little interim, the short gray ninja makes his way onto the property, or maybe ninjas, and kills Maggie and Paul, and Murdaugh doesn't hear anything. Yeah, it's a pretty risky move, ninja. Now, the ninja could have waited until Alex left, of course, but then you have to believe that the victims just quit talking and texting to people right in the middle of conversations for about 20 minutes until Alex leaves. Then the ninja emerges and goes into action. Nah, I don't buy that. I'm just not buying it. The Snapchat video is critical evidence. It contradicts Murdaugh's original alibi story to the police and places him at the scene moments before the victims are never heard from again. Of course, the defense isn't done, and you may see it differently. That's okay. None of us know what the jury will do, of course. That's why they get impaneled and why you have the trial. That's it for today. Thanks, bye.